για την αλήθεια μόνο.
Because nanoparticulates are potentially self-replicating, the cost of producing them is actually quite negligible. As for the question as to why the perpetrators would be spraying themselves, well, that answer is in fact a very simple one. These people want transhumanism. In fact, when one truly considers the transhumanist agenda and it begins to sink in that chemtrails seem to consist of nanoparticulates or smart dust, then the last piece of the puzzle falls snugly into place. And it is far from inconceivable that were the global population to be infused with programmable nanoparticulates, then when these tiny machines are switched on, they will simply do what they are programmed to do. And that what this may be may also be largely due to what other genetic codes have first been introduced into the host. If mankind is indeed ingesting nanoparticulates without their general knowledge, then how might such machines be controlled or switched on? In answer to this question, one only needs to realise that it is now a long-established fact that when anything occurs within the human experience, ultimately the information travels around the body electromagnetically. All our five senses, along with any emotional information, is all interpreted by the brain via these electromagnetic signals. Therefore, it is also an established fact that man can be influenced and even controlled via electromagnetism.
Metallic salts have made our air conductive. This means that we and everything around us can transmit and propagate energy. The air is no longer neutral.
Sheep. They're all just sheep. Every one of them can't see what's going on.
The huge awakening that has been seen in recent times leaves little doubt that mankind and consciousness itself is in a state of evolution. But there also exists compelling evidence suggesting that there are certain forces at work who wish to control the direction this evolution will take.
Every conceivable human emotion has been recorded and cataloged. We've started out slowly, broadcasting a waveform for apathy and boredom, but we will expand. In the future, we hope to test its effectiveness on worker productivity, the crime rate, perhaps even the next election. As for resistance, Phase 1 has ruled that out. We are virtually invisible. We exist so the general population doesn't have to
take.
The second group of materials found in these environmental samples is unidentifiable fibers. And I really want you to appreciate the meaning of unidentifiable. These fibers have been sent to sophisticated laboratories, and there is nothing in the databases that match them. These are fibers, we could say, that do not exist in nature. People around the world are developing lesions on their skin that ooze and produce fibers. This is known as Morgellons syndrome. Tissue samples cultured from ordinary people without this ailment contain and grow the very same fibers. When these fibers are cultured, they produce colonies of filaments. You can see the extension filaments. And these colonies continue to grow and reproduce, branching out into more filaments and more colonies. The filament cultures can be grown from saliva samples, tissue from the skin, mucus, urine, blood, from animals and people, regardless of the presence of the Morgellons condition. So where do these fibers or filaments come from? Airborne environmental samples that were collected by Clifford Carnicom in 2000, the year 2000, gathered at high altitude on a mountain in New Mexico, showed the presence of those fibers, whose structure matches exactly the tubular filaments showing up in our blood, tissues, and skin. Additionally, the samples collected by Mr. Carnicom showed what he calls, and was called in biology, desiccated erythrocytes. This is a multisyllabic term, but it means dried red blood cells. So, why are dried red blood cells in the air? Very puzzling. A medical microscopist, a biologist specializing in microscopy, confirmed to him that they were human red blood cells, but that they had been engineered in some way so as to be preserved. So again, you have to ask yourself, if I were 5 years old, I would say, Mommy, what are red blood cells doing falling out of the sky? Biology divides life into 3 kingdoms: bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Bacteria and archaea are simple organisms with no subcellular compartments. Eukarya are complex with defined cell compartments and internal organelles, mini organs like mitochondria that make DNA and energy for the cell. Plants, animals, and humans are eukaryotic, as are fungi and slime molds. The archaea are the hardiest of the life forms. They're able to withstand grinding pressure, heat, acidity, and alkalinity. They can live in volcanoes, geysers, and the ice shelf. Bacteria, on the other hand, will die in extreme heat and cold, which is why we cook and freeze our food. Now, the materials appearing within these filaments are as tough as archaea. They look like bacteria, and they self-replicate. One looks like something called mycoplasma, but is not. One looks like chlamydia, but is not. And natural fibers, or filaments, would be classified as fungal in the domain of eukaryotes. But these fibers contain forms from the other 2 groups inside them. You're looking at a tubular fiber with self-replicating internal elements resembling bacteria and behaving like archaea. That does not happen in the natural world. So what are they? What's going on? It appears that within our bodies we now have all 3 life kingdoms replicating themselves. What does that make us? Are we still eukaryotes, or are we becoming something else? You could call this transbiology, a crossing of biology, the creation of hybrid forms. Materials are forming in our bodies that are not native to us, not natural, and entirely new. You can see in these pictures the tubular filaments with the branches. They're branching off. That's their self-replication. They're creating new colonies. And you can also see in the bottom picture a little bud. That's the beginning of a new fiber. The territory of things on the scale of atoms and molecules is the nano world. Science has opened up the nano universe, where incredible new creations are possible. Nanotechnology explores materials that are less than a micron in size, or from 1 to 100 nanometers. And a nanometer is a billionth, 1/1000th of a meter. Nature and biology continually work on the nanoscale, assembling proteins and building with crystals to conduct the business of life. Spider webs are an example of that. Very fine filaments with enormous strength and flexibility because they contain nanoscale crystals. So let's go back to the filaments and the structures they contain, these ones that Clifford Carnicom has found. In those unidentifiable filaments, he has observed the formation of red blood cells and submicron-sized structures. So now you've got a filament making its own red blood cells. The engineered cells, the red blood, very, very tough, withstanding excesses of heat and chemicals, indicating that they are designed to endure almost anything. He has put them in a Bunsen flame, he has poured bleach on them, acid, and they still endure. In addition, they are able to replicate, growing outside of the body in a petri dish. This is highly sophisticated technology, going on by itself, not in a laboratory. So we're witnessing red blood growing outside, having nothing to do with the bone marrow, in a petri dish, in somebody's very low-level lab. Could it be that artificial materials are being introduced into living things? You start with materials, you go up to structures, processes, and devices. Could it be that artificial materials are being introduced into us to create new processes from the ground up, which processes will override our own natural biology, our own internal systems. People with advanced Morgellons syndrome started with fibers coming out of their skin, and they're now observing very strange crystalline forms and metallic devices. The fibers became multicolored, and now they were accompanied by plaques, strange, hard little, almost like shards. People say they're like glass, and they're colored. The lesions keep emitting these things. They don't heal over or close, sometimes for years. Here are more plaque structures, even grooved metallic devices. On the right, you'll see one device, the front and the back. These images are supplied by Jan Smith of MorgellonsExposed.com, who has done extensive research on biotech websites, looking for things that match what comes out of her body, and she's finding them. The fibers from her skin were from high-density polyethylene. Here's a news report from April 2008, in which we are told, big headlines, GNA is DNA's chemical cousin. It's a nanotechnology building block. The Biodesign Institute at Arizona State develops the first self-assembled nanostructures composed entirely of GNA, synthetic analog of DNA. The nanostructures contain additional properties not found in DNA, including the ability to form mirror image structures. An NIH article from Japan, on research from Japan, also tells us that various conductive polymers and gold nanoparticles are entrapped within the helical superstructure of this GNA. Now, the particular sugar found in this GNA is called beta-1,3-glucans. And here you see it under what's called a Raman spectroscope, very sophisticated equipment. It looks, the microscopist who looked at this called it a sugar snake. So this is the GNA that you're looking at. When Jan's fibers were put to a high heat flame, they released what she calls a gold payload. So they dropped out this tiny little bead of gold. And here's more. The fibers that contain a head, she calls it a golden head, orbs, and they all have this payload in them. Here you have a nano array that she found, a couple of them in her body. Nano array is a tiny device used in biotech for DNA hybridization. And on the left, you see a diagram from an industry website of a nano array. And on the slide, you can see actually two of them. She's marked them with red X's that came out of her body, looking exactly like this. And again, I'll say it again. The nano arrays are these tiny devices that are used for DNA hybridization. So, I'm going to repeat my nanotech pyramid.
Gentlemen, you are witnesses to the future.
We begin with the emergence of basic filaments, followed by more complex structures. So what processes are going on here? Are these materials combining to form devices that are working together inside us? What is happening to our biology? And remember that tissue samples obtained from ordinary people who have no Morgellons symptoms, no lesions, can be cultured to produce the very same filaments found in people with Morgellons. So we would have to conclude that Morgellons is like the canary in the coal mine, and that only some people are exuding the materials. And could that be because their bodies are rejecting it, while our bodies are integrating it? Jan's body has been sending out these plaques, colored plaques, which are hard pieces of silica. Some of them have these dots on them. They're very small. They require handling with a needle as she places them under a microscope. The plaques are fragile. They can shatter. Quantum dots, which are the colors you see, are nanocrystal semiconductors made of heavy metals surrounded by an organic shell. Now I want you to remember some of these terms. Heavy metals, okay? Heavy metals, aluminum and so forth. So these are nanocrystal semiconductors surrounded by an organic shell, but they are made of heavy metals. And Morgellon subjects are also finding this stuff. Jewel-like hexagons, faceted pyramids, crystals. Hexagons have shown up environmentally, not only in tissue, but they are in environmental fallout. This specimen is provided by Morgellon's research group, and we have a table here this weekend. Mike and Jennifer from Morgellon's research group. Here is a pink, ruby-colored pink layered crystal. The little inset image, you can see actually the layers in it. This was an environmental crystal found. Here is something that was not visible to the naked eye, but the woman who told me about it and sent me the photo was looking at hay. She lives in Oregon, and she was looking at a piece of hay under her microscope, and she found this bright pink, teeny tiny little crystal. You get crystals with embedded hexagons, strands that glitter. The one on the right, that's a glittering strand that came out of somebody's body. Here's a picture of tissue from a lesion with several crystals. You can see the arrows attached to it. You can see the fiber coming out from the bottom. You have combinations of wires and those quantum dots. And there you see the colored plaques that have been coming out of people's bodies. One on the below has fibers attached to it. The industry tells us that quantum dots are tiny nanocrystals whose small size gives them unprecedented tunability. Okay? Tunability. The piezoelectric effect is the internal generation of a voltage when an outside pressure is applied, and vice versa. You can Google the piezo effect. The piezo effect occurs in crystals, ceramics, DNA, and certain proteins. So an example is, when you put a frequency to a crystal, it generates a voltage. And when you put a voltage to a crystal, it responds with a frequency. We call this piezoelectricity. Electricity resulting from applied compression or frequency. Recent work by Clifford Carnicom reveals that a filament culture subjected to a blue light frequency, that's 375 nanometers, resulted in explosive growth of the culture within 24 hours after the initial incubation. So he put the blue light on, incubated it for 5 to 7 days, and then it exploded into all those little fibers that you see. We now live in a frequency-filled world, but I will say this. I came across a very well-known paper on electromagnetic fields and neurological function, written by Professor Ross Adey, Loma Linda School of Medicine, with the subtitle, A Possible Paradigm Shift in Biology. We learn that the Earth's own natural magnetic field peaks, that means peaks, top, at 32 hertz. And that only happens in certain equatorial thunderstorms. The electronics we use today generate electromagnetic fields that are tremendous in the megahertz and gigahertz, million hertz and billion hertz range. So here you can see Earth and nature up at the top, 3 to 30 hertz. You can see HAARP has a low range. Then you see the Gwen towers, that's ground wave emergency network, the blue. HAARP again has another range right after that. Gwen has another range after that. And look at the phones and internet. We're talking about million hertz and billion hertz. Professor Adey reminds us that chemical bonds are magnetic bonds, formed between atoms by paired electrons with opposite spins that are attracted magnetically. So if nature itself moves in the 3 to 30 hertz range, what is happening to us on the biochemical level with all the different frequencies our bodies are experiencing? What is being done to our biology? Again, I'll repeat Ross Adey's little tenet here. Chemical bonds are magnetic bonds. Electromagnetism is capable of changing what is happening in our bodies. Frequencies are capable of supplying to the synthetic materials in our bodies the force or power that activates them, gets them working, makes them come alive. Nothing about us today is normal. We have hair that glows and skin that shimmers. This is from a healthy woman in Oregon who's been doing microscopy. Here is a glowing little arrow-shaped thing found in rainwater when the same woman who supplied the former previous images, was scanning. She was scanning water from a puddle under her microscope, and she saw this arrow-shaped thing that glowed. And here's a hexagon that grew a fiber in 20 seconds as it was being observed under the microscope. The field of synthetic biology is a new frontier of science. It draws from biochemistry and biomedicine, genetics, robotics, radiation biology, and information technologies. Using nanotechnology, its goals are to improve and transcend the limits of nature.
My name is Trevor Constantine. I'm was a psychologist working for the military. I had to quit. I had no choice. Not when I realized what I was part of. The American people have been kept in the dark about the true scientific progress in this country. Technologies of mass control exist that the public would never dream of. I know, because I helped develop them. They call it psychotronic warfare. It's a research program dealing with mind control. These bastards have finally decoded the human brain. Every emotion we have, every thought that we experience, they produce evoked potentials, little electrical impulses firing in the brain. These spooks have developed a weapon that can lock onto those impulses, read them, and then control them remotely. They can control everything a person does. Voices. That's how they get you. The spooks have developed a technology called synthetic telepathy. They beam a frequency at you and let your skeleton conduct the voices like an antenna. Sounds like ghosts inside of you. They've targeted individuals for experimentation.
One wasn't enough.
I guess you were the dry run.
Mass behavioral modification. I don't get it.
Neither did I. I couldn't figure it out either, man. And then I looked up. Cell phone towers. Major power transmission network. There's one on every block. They can control the whole city.